Welcome back to Online Ed 2022. I'll hand you back to the conference chair, Stella Akabusi. Stella, over to you.
Thank you, Tom. Welcome to the Connected Campus, a means of enhanced engagement with the University of Texas at Arlington. Before I introduce our speaker, don't forget to type your questions in the Q&A tab at any point throughout the session, and I'll put them to our speaker at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to hand over to Vistaps Kabari from the University of Texas at Arlington. Vistaps, over to you.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm not going to say good morning or good afternoon or good evening because we live in a digitally connected world. And while it's afternoon for me, it could very well be early morning or late evening somewhere else. What we're going to talk about today is the connected campus as a means of enhanced engagement. But before we do that, I'd like to ask you all to close your eyes for a second. And I know I'm taking a risk when I ask everyone to close their eyes in front of screens. I'm going to imagine that you're in the 1800s and you are basically Samuel J. May, who was an American reformer, a champion of education, and a champion of women's rights. And here's what he said. In the winter of 1813 and 1814, I attended a mathematical school kept in Boston. On entering the room, we were struck at the appearance of an ample blackboard suspended on the wall with lumps of chalk on the ledge below and cloths hanging at either side. I have never heard of such a thing before. In your mind's eyes now, while you're still having your eyes closed, think about what it might have been like to be at that point in time. And now transport yourselves to the 21st century and try to put aside everything that you might have thought is the norm, a classroom, and anything else that you might think is normal, regular, and has to be done in order to have education at the university level. Now, if you don't mind, open your eyes. When we talk about connected, we talk about things that are joined or linked together. It's physical. It's having parts or elements logically linked together. A campus is defined very, very specifically. It's the grounds and buildings of a university, a school, a college. It's the grounds that resemble a campus. It's a university, college, or school viewed as an academic, social, or spiritual entity, but in all of these cases, it is physical. When we talk about a connected campus, we're generally talking about transportation, being able to get to a campus or being able to move from one part of the campus to another part of the campus. Or at most, we're talking about the network, where we are connected to a central Wi-Fi network so that we can have access to different facilities and different platforms and programs all at the same time. But today, we live in a world that is phygital, one where physical and digital have come together. So we need to take a good look at what does a connected campus really mean to us and what should it mean to us in the future. We've gone through an evolution over the years in terms of space and location, from beautiful campuses where people were in cold, dark buildings very often, to buildings that were actually designed to force connections and engagement of people and flow, where we actually designed staircases and rooms such that people had to come together and people had to pass each other so that we had conversations at the water cooler or at coffee machines. In fact, there was a landmark report in 2018 by Arup that talked about the campus of the future being in terms of these buildings that actually had flow that was designed to connect people. In a few years after that, we actually went far further than that, where we really talked about connection being networking of areas and the integration of isolated systems so that everything could be accessed from wherever we were on that physical campus. We also talked about campuses such as for New York University, where they had a global network. Those connections were mini campuses all over the world, a duplication of space, if you will, but with a change in geography. The question that we have to ask ourselves is, can we move from physical space that is limited to something that is unconstrained by time, space, and location. And what would that mean in terms of being a campus? We also have to keep in mind, just as Samuel May, that we've gone through an evolution in terms of dissemination of knowledge. From the learned sage in the time of Plato and Socrates, who sat in front of a few students, the only ones who had access to knowledge, if you will, to the Gutenberg Revolution, where we basically had books, and these took the learned sage now and transformed the knowledge that the learned sage had to actually going much further and taking that book and making it possible for faculty all over to use the knowledge in the book and teach large numbers of students, which meant that we went to these large classrooms where we had 60, 70, 100, and even 300 to 400 students learning from a faculty member. And I'm sure we've all seen great faculty members and horrible faculty members, people who were enthusiastic and got the students engaged, and others who opened that textbook and actually read from it. We moved along where we could use instructional technology to engage the classroom. And then obviously we went to the era where we had Coursera, edX, and others, where we had MOOCs and online platforms. And then approximately 2 years ago, we suddenly saw the start of what a lot of people have called the Zoom University, where we were forced to do remote emergency teaching, if you will, that hopefully has now transitioned to true online education, where we connected with students from all over, with them sitting in their bedrooms, in their classrooms, sometimes even in parking lots, such that they could get Wi-Fi, and then being connected together to an individual. The question we have to ask ourselves, even at this stage in time, is can we move from bringing students to campus to enabling learners to access knowledge wherever they are? And when we talk about a connected campus in a phygital world, we need to be able to move away from this concept that we have a physical location being the only driver to something that can be much broader. So let's try to look at what connected has been. Connected to date has largely meant networked. And we can talk about all the details of networking, and I won't go through it. There are experts who can do far more in terms of 4G and 5G and LTE and Wi-Fi and Wi-Fi 6 and so forth. And we can talk about the Internet of Things and how that can be brought together. But in reality, we are using dumb systems to make a smart campus. We are concerned about stuff such as bandwidth and cloud computing. We have to be very concerned about cybersecurity and data security, and weaving fabrics by grouping components and networks into a modern architecture. We'd like to make it intuitive. We'd like to make it intelligent so as to be able to filter and react to events, but we need to make it flexible and loosely coupled so that our learners can join as they need and our faculty can interact as needed. And I'm going to say this carefully, 24/7, 365. Networked, however, does not mean integrated. And let's use a very simple example of what I'm sure all of you have gone through or at least have heard of. We have a student who comes to campus and tries to register for a course. They're then told, no, you have to pay your fees first. So they go to the bursar's office to pay the fees. And they're told, no, you need permission from somewhere else. So they move to another office and they have to go from pillar to post trying to get signatures. In the digital world, they do the same thing, except all they're doing is clicking buttons and being moved from one to the other. We truly have not integrated it into a single system where it enables a student to get something far faster and to be able to put all the information that we have into a single access point, where when we register, we also know what the course credits are, what the admission is, what the financial aid is, and it all comes together. This, if you will, is a connected campus truly if we can get all that done all together rather in diverse and isolated aspects. Connected, therefore, should mean engaged, with the network that we've talked about serving as a highway and a nervous system, rather than just a system of being able to substitute human interaction physically with something that's done with a click of a button. All we've done is take bureaucracy from one side and apply it to another, waiting in line on one side to waiting in line on another. And I'm sure we've all experienced it when you take a phone call and you try to call someone and you face a recording. Hit number 1 if you need this, hit number 2 if you need this, and then you have a wait time of 15 minutes. You will be served in the order that you actually called, and we can call you back. Nice, but it doesn't give you that engagement. We have to think about education the same way. Each time we stop someone from being engaged, we are losing a learner. We have to figure out that the intent is not technology for the sake of technology, but putting faculty, students, and more than anything else, knowledge in the center. Geographical co-location in a connected campus should be irrelevant. Now, this does not mean that a campus and physical aspects are not important. It is still the most powerful way that we have of engaging learners is to have the social interaction. But there are lots of cases where that is not possible, or that is not the most efficient or the most effective for some learners. And we have the means now of connecting them to that campus in a true phygital space. We have to talk about the fact that time, space, and location should no longer be constraints. We've lived in a world where we can only get knowledge from 8 in the morning to 5 in the evening, or perhaps from 7 to 6, or if there's evening school during that time period. We all have terms that start on the 25th of January and the 16th of August. We have to ask ourselves, in a true digital world, why is that the norm? Shouldn't we be doing something else? Our campuses have evolved from physical infrastructure to infrastructure that is networked, from having computer labs with everything in the lab to being connected to the cloud, for having classrooms with IT to students being able to bring their own devices, and obviously the challenges that exist of bandwidth when we talk about that. We've gone through a phase of Zoom teaching, and we've truly learned from that, hopefully, what online and digital education is about, not just remote emergency teaching. And we're getting into the phase where true immersive education using AR and VR are becoming realities. But we have to look a lot further than that. We have to figure out in terms of transactions such as registration, fees, and others, but that's just the surface. What is really needed is stuff such as advising, wellness, connections, and academic support, such that a learner, and I hope you've recognized that I've moved from saying student to learner, such that a learner is connected to the campus that is providing the education and the knowledge when they need it, rather than when we want to provide it to them. Space to date has shaped our community and our identity. In fact, it has shaped higher education. A connected campus can enlarge that space. It can increase engagement, giving the engagement when the learner needs it, rather than saying, well, you have an important question, but now wait 8 hours before I can give you an answer. Or you have a desperate wellness situation, but I can't deal with it right now because it's 9 in the evening and the wellness center shut down at 7 o'clock. We have the opportunity now to extend those hours, to extend that engagement, to make it more digital as a supplement to augment what we're doing, using unsmart networks to enable smart, interconnected activities. So when we look at a connected campus side by side with a traditional campus, here's what I think we should be looking for. On a traditional campus, our students and faculty are co-located. We ask everyone to come to the campus. Now, COVID-19 taught us something very, very important. We found that we could actually go to the learner and make sure that they got the knowledge, perhaps not in the best way possible, but we're learning and making it better and better every day. On a connected campus, learners, faculty, and staff could very well be located globally and yet coming together in order to provide the services that are needed. And most important, disseminating the knowledge that is needed so that our learners get the knowledge when they need it, as they need it, and where they need it. Recruitment of students and of faculty was based on geography. If I had a wonderful faculty member who was based in Europe and I needed them to come to the Arlington campus, it was very difficult to come for a single lecture. Plans had to be made months before, tickets had to be bought. On a truly connected, engaged campus, we can actually have them pop in and out for an hour or 2 hours whenever needed. So recruitment is based on excellence and the convenience of the individual, especially that of our learners. Enrollment in faculty staff numbers was space limited. We had to have offices for everyone, even if they didn't use it every day. We could only address a certain number of students, not because we didn't want to have more, but because laboratories and classrooms could only be scheduled between certain hours. On a true connected, engaged campus, you have enhanced capacity and flexibility. We can have multiple term start dates, multiple term lengths, and multiple modalities. A student or a learner should be able to split in between face-to-face, completely online, or hybrid based on their needs and based on the requirements that they have so as to continue their education. Online and campus modes were largely disconnected in the past. Today, they should be, just as I said, flexible, interchangeable, and connected. Teaching was largely space limited and classroom based. So if we wanted to take a student onto an archaeological dig, they had to go for a special term where they could move there. If students wanted to see a museum that was in another country, they had to talk about visas and they had to talk about travel. And yes, in today's world, they have to talk about COVID and the restrictions that are there. In a truly engaged, connected campus, learning is enabling as, when, and where needed, and we can bring those things to the learner, not necessarily onto campus, but where the learner is situated, so that we can actually have the faculty member at one location and using AR and VR, enable the students and the learners to actually take part in that conversation and have much richer experiences. Again, I want to emphasize this does not mean that we have to replace everything that we do physically. This is augmentation and supplementing what we do and perhaps making it possible for those who cannot make it onto our campus. Education had to be distinct from work. And therefore, we started growing apart, even though we talked about things such as co-ops. But we also said that if you have to work from 8 to 5, I'm sorry, unless we have evening classes, you can't attend. The connected, engaged campus gives us an opportunity for having a continuum of education and greater collaboration between employers, employees, and higher ed in so many different ways. Think about a classroom that is taken into a manufacturing facility virtually, such that our learners can truly take part in it. Think about being able to work not through only a study abroad, which is only available to a minor segment of our population, to actually being immersed in another culture through the online and the digital world. Generally, academic and student affairs were kept separately. In a connected, engaged campus, we need to bring them together. We need to consider the learner holistically with a 24/7 wraparound service focused on the student wherever they are and wherever they may want to be. And this is happening on campuses all across the world today. Advising, as we all know, has had long wait times and is generally between certain times of the day. Today, it can be made available 24/7. Advising is generally reactive and punitive, but advising can be proactive, enabling, and seeing as a partner as the student needs it. And it's not just advising in terms of which course should be taken, but also in terms of how they can progress along the path that they have chosen in every single course. We've always talked about being data-driven, but that has made us isolated and separate. What we need to be and can be through an engaged, connected campus is data-inspired, integrated for planning and for operations. So a connected campus, therefore, is much more than a network campus. It's much more than a smart campus. It makes geographical location immaterial. Again, I emphasize, it doesn't say replace physical campuses. It says it can expand it for our students and learners, our faculty and our staff. And therefore, it dramatically changes the scope of who a student is. It can now be a person who comes directly from high school or could be a person coming back for reskilling and upskilling while they're simultaneously working. It also changes the role of a faculty member because we can have experts from all around the world serve on our faculty without having to physically move. It catalyzes knowledge availability on demand, from taking a small module just in time to actually going through the entire course of the program. And in doing so, we are transitioning from the staid old way of teaching, where there is a single way of the learned professor talking, to something being far more engaged, where students are now engaged in active learning using digital modalities to interact with knowledge while they are learning itself. This enables insight-driven guidance and success of a student holistically 24/7, 365, because we can track and use and enable adaptively the knowledge that they need at any point in time to assist them in going past obstacles. It provides faculty the tools and mechanisms for local and global engagement, and it moves away from transactional engagement to dynamic engagement, changing as and when it is needed. Therefore, what we're trying to do is it provides contextual information based on the needs for operation far more than just going through a campus tour. And by doing that, we're improving our sociological contexts of communication, belonging, and support. But we have to keep some things very, very clearly in our minds. This system must be designed with the student and the faculty at the center rather than buildings and the need for more and more space. It's capacity, but when we talk about capacity, we have to talk about, it's a bandwidth and Wi-Fi connectivity, and yes, Wi-Fi deserts that actually exist all over the world where we don't have bandwidth or students cannot gain access to our networks. Resilience, such as the ability to handle outages, instantaneously switching to alternates and backup systems. Flexibility that is adaptable to traffic on demand, and security, because we talk about campuses being open and we want them to be open, but more and more we are concerned about ransomware and what happens about cybersecurity. And we need to make sure that if we're truly going to be a global, connected, engaged campus, we must be interoperable across institutions, countries, and standards. But most importantly, and I'll keep coming back to that, it has to be a proactive nature. Student support, which does not duplicate physical lines in going from pillar to post, but must be engaged all through. It therefore enables the merging of on-campus, remote, and off-campus activities. Therefore, let's try to summarize by then, what is a campus? A traditional campus is very simple. It's a combination of common spaces, labs, classrooms, offices, residence halls, services, but people are located centrally and distributed, but largely physically co-located. It has very inefficient use of space and resources. For at least half the day and half the year, it's not used. And access is constrained by time, space, and location. The network campus on the other side has similar spaces, but they're connected by a network with some off-campus services. Back office functions are connected, but the connected campus is a combination of physical space and integrated digital platforms focused on people, with people being spread all over and connected seamlessly. Access then is unconstrained by time, space, and location. I hope I've given you something to think about in terms of where we could be headed and where we are already headed for the future. And I hope I've left some time for questions.
Thank you so much, Vistab. You have certainly provoked lots of thoughts, because we're getting lots and lots of questions. Thank you for keeping a little bit of time to get through as many of those as we can. I found this really interesting. So let me get straight into it. Okay, so if we think about going to where the students are in a form of distributed learning like Khan Academy or YouTube videos, is the accreditation or certification also distributed? Will students truly be at the center and the arbiter of their learning success?
Well, the answer to that will depend on how we want to look at it. If we truly want to look at it with the learner being at the center, then we have to figure out how they are in control of their transcripts rather than us. And I'm using transcripts in a very generic sense. We control what they do based on what we put on a piece of paper and say, you're either qualified or you're not qualified. If we truly want to be able to make knowledge available to them, then they should be able to control what they need to get and how they get it. So they could get one course from the University of Oxford and another course from the University of Texas at Arlington, and if they meet the same standards that are needed for a credential, and that's where accreditation will have to be looked at this much broader level. What is the threshold of knowledge that is needed to be deemed competent in a certain area? Rather than you can only take the course, which is Psychology 1322 in my university, but nowhere else. So I think, yes, it does look at accreditation in a much broader sense, but we're already talking about it because we have been doing this through transfer. We just have to look at it in a much broader way and put the learner at the center rather than the campus.
Great. What do you think are the biggest challenges around learner-to-learner engagement, particularly asynchronously?
I think the biggest challenge is actually the psychology of those of us who have gray hair. We've always thought about physical learning, learning when you can see the person, learning when you can be in a classroom together as being the only way forward. If you look at those who have grown up in a digital world, the barriers and the constraints that they see are not the same as the ones we see. And so I think learner to learner, if we truly looked at how one learner can learn from another person, they're already doing that, whether we like it or not, by playing computer games. We don't like to accept that. But the amount of knowledge that they are gaining through that, the amount of information that they are able to grasp even when they play with each other, we might not like the knowledge that they're gaining, we might not like what they're doing, but they are learning from each other. The interaction is very different. The social compacts are very different. But I think the biggest challenge is, can we look beyond what we've done in the past? And can we engage with newer modes? Can we take things like the augmented reality and make it part of our normal life? Can we say that I can have a digital avatar of myself sitting in front of another digital avatar, and that is a meeting? And can I be satisfied with it? I think that's our biggest challenge more than anything else. The tools already exist. We have to implement them.
Thank you. The Connected Campus calls for more engagement by faculty, but what's in it for the teacher or lecturer to prompt them to extend further than what they're already doing?
And that's a wonderful question. It's not going to be because the university says do more. All our faculty are tremendously engaged with the students. That's why they've joined a university. They're all tremendously engaged with the generation and the dissemination of knowledge. They want to be able to spread their knowledge as far as possible. What's in it for them is to be able to reach a wider audience and be able to impact far more people, but we cannot expect them to do it on top of everything they're doing. We have to, as a university, as the administration, enable that to happen by giving them the tools and the time in order to develop into this mode. We have to be open with them about great ideas that they might have that don't fit into the normal mode of how we've been able to do things. And some of those came organically because of COVID, that we allowed them to do it because we had no other choice. And there were some wonderful results. So for our faculty, it is that greater engagement with students, something they've always wanted to do. We have to enable it for them.
Thank you so much. We're going to have to wrap up there. We've had lots of questions. It was really thought-provoking. I loved it. Next session is the final session of the day is with Cat School of Science and Health, Yeshiva University, discussing some approaches that work in creating online engagement. Before we move to that, I just want to, he's gone already, I want to say thank you to Vistaf, and I'll see you in the next session.